mysterious, beguiling, enigmatic. India is a land that is almost impossible to describe or define, though many have tried. American author Mark Twain said, "India is the cradle of the human race, the birthplace of human speech, the grandmother of legend, the great-grandmother of tradition." French academic Romain Rolland said that if there is one place on the face of the earth where all the dreams of living men have found a home from the earliest days, when man began to dream of his existence, it is India. India is said to be the birthplace of science, of mathematics, of medicine, and of all the world's major religions. Beautiful, transcendent, captivating, it seduces visitors with its colors, sights, and sounds. Once seen, it is never forgotten. It was and is a land of immense wealth and grinding poverty, of lasting harmony and pervasive conflict. It seems, paradoxically, to be eternally at peace with itself, yet in constant turmoil. Its history is its strength, but also its curse. India's journey to modernity is a drama dominated by iconic individuals and remarkable circumstances. Sometimes the actors in the spectacle are able to influence events, but often they're at the mercy of forces beyond anyone's control. It is a drama of bitter conflict and violent passion, but also a tale of men and women of peace and wisdom. Many Indians die fighting Germans and Japanese in the name of the British Empire. Many more die fighting one another. Using newly discovered and rare archive film, much of it in original color, this is a unique visual journey through India's contemporary history. India, a visual homage. (1903). These are the earliest moving images ever taken in the subcontinent. Shot by American pioneer of cinematography Thomas Armat, they reveal a unique glimpse of a vast ancient land teeming with people. A land of many cultures, races, languages, and religions. Its traditions predate the civilizations of Greece and Rome. India is ruled by a small minority of Europeans, the British. They control a mighty empire, the greatest the world has ever seen. But like all conquerors, most of the British appear to be oblivious to the subtleties and sensitivities of the people they rule. When the British first came to India, they found a land still cast in the mold of the great Muslim Mughal Empire, which had ruled the subcontinent from the 16th century. Vijay Ramakrishnan, a civil servant in Madras in the 1930s.
The British go at our buildings in wonder, but seem to forget that we built them. They are our heritage. They make friends with our princes and many of them embrace Britishness, but they don't realize they're destroying a delicate balance in our society that has been centuries in the making. Most significantly, Our Muslim community resents the changes. Once rulers here, their power has been undermined. That is ominous. The British want to create a Pax Britannicum, like the Roman peace in Europe of 2000 years ago. But they have brought to an end almost 500 years of relative peace under Mughal rule. I fear they may reap a whirlwind as a consequence.
This recently discovered colour film, shot in the 1930s, has never been seen before. It is 16mm Kodachrome, fully restored in high definition. The film captures images of India which illustrate its distant past, before it began its journey to the modern world. Indian philosopher Swami Vivekananda.
Civilizations have arisen in other parts of the world, but always with the blast of war trumpets, each idea soaked in a deluge of blood, the wails of widows, the tears of orphans. But India for thousands of years existed in relative peace and harmony. Ideas after ideas have marched out from her, but every word has been spoken with a blessing behind it and peace before it.
The film captures India's astonishing history and diversity. It shows many of India's treasures, including the greatest of them all, the gleaming white limestone of the Taj Mahal. Built as a mausoleum for his wife in 1648, it was described poetically by the Emperor Shah Jahan, the man who built it.
Should a sinner make his way to this mansion, all his past sins are to be washed away. The sight of this mansion creates sorrowing sighs, and the sun and the moon shed tears from their eyes. In this world, this edifice has been made to display thereby the Creator's glory.
The bustling streets of the old city of Delhi and the old government house. New Delhi, the physical embodiment of the Imperial British Raj. V.S. Naidu, a British trained surveyor, returns home in 1930 and travels across India as part of a team surveying his country's historic buildings.
When I first saw New Delhi, I took offense to it. It seemed to me to be very Western in design, with only a few token gestures to Indian tradition. Of course, my appreciation wasn't helped by the fact that it represented British rule, a giant symbol of their power over us. But it grew on me, especially in the evenings, when the setting sun made its color softer and when the gardens matured. I realized what a fine piece of work it is.
Kongara Kalan Forest, Hyderabad. This amazing colour film illustrates the unique relationship between India's British masters and the country's ancient rulers in their 600 princely states as they engage in their favourite pastime, tiger hunting. It is estimated that there were over 100,000 Bengal tigers in India at the turn of the 20th century. But hunting is organised on an enormous scale. One form of slaughter, hardly a hunt at all, as the tiger has almost no chance to escape, and there is almost no risk to the hunter, is ring hunting. Bahadur Kirtianan Singh, the Raja of Banali, owns one of the largest estates in India. He enjoys ring hunting with his British friends.
I was invited by my esteemed friend Colonel O'Connor. Buffalo calves were tied in the jungle as bait. About 50 elephants were sent out to circle the place where the tiger was likely to conceal itself. Then, when the ring was ready, orders were given for a couple of elephants to go inside and flush out the tiger. It usually got enraged, charging the elephant that went near it. In the beginning, it was exciting, but after a while, the tiger becomes exhausted and lies down. With 2 or 3 rings being made every day, I have seen hundreds of tigers shot.
Some of the records of kills bear recounting. Bengal civil servant George Yule bags 500 tigers in 28 years. The Maharaja of Sarguja kills 1,700. The Prince of Wales, the future Edward VIII, and later Duke of Windsor, shoots 17 tigers in 1 week in 1921. Lord Linlithgow, while Viceroy of India, shoots 16 bears, 28 leopards, 38 rhinos, and 120 tigers in just 68 days of hunting. The Maharaja of Cooch Behar bags 365 tigers, 311 leopards, 438 buffaloes, and 207 rhinos during his lifetime. Lalgarh Palace, Bikaner, Rajasthan. More stunning images of Indian princely ceremony in all its magnificence. The scene is so reminiscent of India's glorious past, but it also emphasizes its many contradictions. It is the wedding of the granddaughter of General Maharaja Saganga Singh, the ruler of Bikaner, and the only non-white member of Britain's Imperial War Cabinet during the Great War. His granddaughter is to be married to the heir apparent of the princely state of Udaipur. Ganga Singh is one of India's richest men. His granddaughter's spouse is carried on a solid silver palanquin, and the couple are saluted by the Maharaja's personal bodyguard. It is as if time has stood still, but the world is changing, and more quickly than anyone can possibly imagine. The Delhi Durbar, 1903, only the second of its kind ever held. Orchestrated by Lord Curzon, Viceroy of India, it is a spectacular display of Britain's imperial pomp at the height of her power. These are images of a world long gone. Lord Kitchener supervises the display of military might. The massed ranks of the Indian Army parade in front of the Aga Khan, Maharajas and princes, and the Duke of Connaught, representing King Edward VII. V.S. Naidu reflects on the British rule he witnessed 100 years ago.
I often smile at the British. They can be charming and benign, but they're also cunning and ruthless. Ever since the days of Robert Clive and the East India Company, they have been prepared to do lucrative deals to get their way. But if thwarted, will all too easily use force. When direct rule was imposed after the Great Rebellion of 1857 and their Raj began, they justified it by saying to themselves and to us that it was in our best interests. They were bringing civilization and peace and security. So now we have it. Imperial India, the jewel in the British crown. Will it ever change? Not, I suspect, in my lifetime.
British governance is sometimes benign, often cruel. It ruthlessly exploits India's resources and suppresses opposition. But it also transforms the country, economically and socially, and brings it into the modern world. It fosters a love affair between India and Britain that endures to this day. But in between comes hostility and tragedy. This remarkable film is one of the earliest experiments in kinemacolor, a pioneering technique to record color images on film. The film captures the third Delhi Durbar, December 1911, and the massed ranks of the Indian Army in all their martial grandeur and imperial pomp. The footage is shot by Charles Urban, another early film pioneer, and records the celebration in Delhi to mark the coronation of George V, King and Emperor. Only 2.5 years before the First World War, Britain's power has reached its zenith. With the huge fleets of her Royal Navy controlling the oceans of the world, Britannia really does rule the waves, and she does govern an empire upon which the sun never sets. The king travels to India with his queen, Mary, to be proclaimed as Emperor and Empress of India. All India's princes, noble families and dignitaries attend to pay homage to their imperial rulers. However, Britain's preeminence in the world suffers its first catastrophic blow in the horror of the global conflict of 1914-18. Its title could not have been more apt. It is called the Great War for Civilization. Fought between Europe's great powers, it soon engulfs the entire world in its carnage. Over 1 million Indian troops serve overseas during the war. They fight for the British Empire. Over 60,000 are killed. Many more are wounded. Indian soldiers are awarded 15 Victoria Crosses during the Great War. India's men fight in Asia, East Africa, Mesopotamia, North Africa, and on the Western Front. The Dome of the Rock, Jerusalem, December 1917. One of the most sacred places in Islam. It sits on Temple Mount, an equally sacred shrine for Christians and Jews. Jerusalem is captured from the Ottoman Empire by British General Edmund Allenby on December 9th. When he pays homage to the Holy City 2 days later, he is accompanied by 4 divisions of Indian cavalry and lancers, who were never far from danger. Britain emerges victorious from the Great War. However, she has been significantly weakened. (1920s) Britain. Few realise that its great empire is in decline, content to enjoy the trappings of privilege and the traditions of an age that will soon be gone. Britain's working class is no longer prepared to accept the status quo. These unique images are captured by film pioneer Claude Fries Green. he uses a technique called biocolor to record them. They show Britain in 1925, bustling, prosperous, and thriving. But only for a few. There is also grinding poverty for millions. The 1920s become a time of boom and wealth for some, but also an era of turmoil and discontent, resulting in a general strike in May 1926. The general strike is a catastrophe and is broken within days as the power of the British elite, supported by a compliant middle class, keeps working class people where they have always been, on the poverty line. For the time being, the old ways of service and privilege at home and abroad remain. But not for long. Soon, everything will come crashing down in the Great Depression of the 30s and the new global conflict it will herald, the Second World War. Britain's preeminence is already threatened by the growing power of its former colony, the United States. But within Britain's mighty empire, the world seems timeless, her rule paramount, especially in India. The British Raj of the 1930s is a dramatic contrast between the benevolent and the malevolent. Well-meaning British missionaries and administrators do much to help the poor and destitute. Significant investments are made in infrastructure, transport, and communications. The British think their values and beliefs are without equal. They work hard to pass them on to people they believe are their subjects and who need their help and wisdom. British missionary schools and hospitals try to help with medical care and educational programs. But the benevolence comes at a price: obedience and subservience. The missionaries put the blame for the gross inequalities of India's caste system at the door of Hinduism. So along with the education and healthcare comes Anglican Christianity. There is no doubting the sincerity of many missionaries, teachers, and colonial officials, but much of it is patronizing and pays little respect to Indian culture and tradition. Despite the worthiness of many, the British are foreign rulers. Many of them are far from benign and deal with opposition ruthlessly. Colour film from 80 years ago, a bygone era which we will never see again, depicting vast tracts of India that are remote and grindingly poor, unchanged for centuries. The Nilgiri Mountains of southwest India, part of the Western Ghats, a mountain range that runs almost the entire length of India's west coast. 8,000 feet high, one of India's most beautiful regions. V.S. Naidu.
The Nilgiri is home to the Toda people, an ancient tribe who believe in polyandry. The women marry all the brothers of their chosen man and so have multiple husbands. The British must think that very strange. I don't think the British understand us at all. They think they do, but they have no idea. We have more poor people than anywhere else, but we also have more princes than the whole of Europe put together. Most of them with immense wealth. We are not all pankawalas.
Sir Mirza Ismail, the Diwan, Prime Minister of Mysore. He writes to a friend in England in 1938.
I am one of the fortunate ones with an excellent education in a position of power and influence, but sometimes I despair. All but a few of the British still regard me as inferior, despite my status and accomplishments. Some of them who have lived here for a while will tell you they understand India. But they fail to realize that the India they describe is nothing more than a British invention and will not survive when they leave.
The Darjeeling Himalayan Railway, the toy train, a narrow-gauge railway that runs between New Jalpaiguri and Darjeeling in West Bengal. Built in 1879, it runs for 48 miles and rises from 300 feet at New Jalpaiguri to over 7,200 feet at Darjeeling. These are magical scenes of India's past in colour. Darjeeling was only a village until the mid-19th century, when the East India Company realised the climate was ideal for a sanatorium for British soldiers. Then the tea planters came and developed the distinctive Darjeeling black tea, recognised all over the world. It soon became a haven of cool air and tranquility away from the heat of summer. V.S. Naidu.
Darjeeling is remarkable. It lies in the shadow of the Himalayas. One can see the mighty Mount Everest in the distance. So many different people live here. It is home to the Nepali and Tibetan and many people from the south. There are so many languages and dialects wafting in the air. It is amazing.
India is said to be the birthplace of religion. This is Varanasi, the spiritual capital of India, the city of lights, the holiest of the 7 sacred cities in Hinduism and Jainism. Hindus believe that death at Varanasi brings salvation. It is one of the oldest continuously inhabited cities in the world, and the oldest in India. Ghats, or steps, along the embankments of the Ganges are where pilgrims perform their ritual ablutions to cleanse themselves of sin. American author Mark Twain said of Varanasi, "It is older than history, older than tradition, older even than legend, and looks twice as old as all of them put together." Despite the apparent supremacy of British rule during the 1930s, the Raj is beginning to be seen by many as nothing but a flimsy veneer. India begins to descend into turmoil. At its centre is an ageing British-trained lawyer called Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi. Made only too aware of the prejudice and privilege of white colonial rule after working as a lawyer in South Africa, Gandhi returns to India in 1915 and quickly establishes himself as the inspirational leader of his people. He gives voice to India's desire to be free by strict adherence to a strategy of non-violent civil disobedience. He embraces the cause of women, untouchables, and other oppressed groups within Indian society. He organizes boycotts and strikes. As thousands of Hindus undertake their pilgrimage along the headwaters of the sacred Ganges to the temple of Badrinath in the foothills of the Himalayas, Gandhi writes to Lord Irwin, India's Viceroy, March 1930.
Dear friend, Before embarking on civil disobedience and taking the risk I have dreaded to take all these years, I must approach you to find a way out. My personal faith is absolutely clear. I cannot intentionally hurt anything that lives, much less fellow human beings, even though they may do the greatest wrong to me and mine. Though I hold the British rule in India to be a curse, I do not therefore consider Englishmen in general to be worse than any other people on earth. And why do I regard the British rule as a curse? It has impoverished the dumb millions by a system of progressive exploitation and by a ruinously expensive military and civil administration which the country can never afford. It has reduced us politically to serfdom. It has sapped the foundations of our culture, and we have been reduced to a state bordering on cowardly helplessness.
He ends the letter with a heartfelt plea.
It is, I know, open to you to frustrate my design by arresting me, but tens of thousands will be ready in a disciplined manner to take up the work after me, and in the act of disobeying the Salt Act, lay themselves open to the penalties of a law that should never have disfigured the statute book. I have no desire to cause you unnecessary embarrassment. If you care to discuss matters further with me, and you would like me to postpone publication of this letter, I shall gladly refrain on receipt of a telegram to that effect.
Irwin does not respond to the letter. Salt, vital to the Indian diet, is heavily taxed. So Gandhi marches to the sea to collect salt, but refuses to pay the tax on it. Irwin orders Gandhi's arrest. He immediately goes on hunger strike. His nobility and courage inspire his people and infuriate the British. British politician Winston Churchill reveals the contempt in which he is held by the British elite when he says in February 1931, "It is nauseating to see Mr. Gandhi, a seditious Middle Temple lawyer of the type well known in the East, now posing as a fakir, striding half-naked up the steps of the viceregal palace to parley on equal terms with the representative of the King Emperor." October 1931, Gandhi visits Darwin in Lancashire, the heart of the British cotton industry, to explain why he has begun a boycott of cotton clothes and materials from Britain in favour of Indian-produced goods. Despite Winston Churchill's insult and significant government propaganda, Gandhi endears himself to the British public. He also travels to Rome. He is feted by Italy's Benito Mussolini and his fascist regime. While he is away, his followers gather in their thousands to pray for his safe return. He is their Mahatma, great soul, their inspirational leader. Or simply Bapu, their father. This is Moradabad, 100 miles east of Delhi, 1932. It is home to many of India's Dalit community, the untouchables, at the bottom of the country's ancient caste system. Although the rigors of the system vary, in many cases, Dalits are segregated in their own villages, out of sight of other castes. They are not allowed to use the same wells as other people and are reduced to begging for water or travelling long distances to collect it from muddy pools. Any contact with those of a higher caste is forbidden. They do manual labour and most of the menial jobs, especially those thought to be impure, involving animals and human waste. Gandhi devotes himself to freeing them from their bonds.
I do not want to be reborn, but if I have to be reborn, I should be born an untouchable, so that I may share their sorrows, sufferings, and the affronts leveled at them, in order that I may endeavor to free myself and them from that miserable condition. I therefore pray that if I should be born again, I should do so as an untouchable.
September 1932, Bombay. Friday prayers for the city's Muslim community. Thousands of worshippers pray for themselves and for India. Within minutes of them ending, violence breaks out in the city centre. Bombay has been in turmoil all year. The demonstrations against British rule are typical of what is happening all over India. The injured are taken away in Indian Congress Party ambulances. Gandhi has been in prison for most of the year, convicted of sedition. He has been on hunger strike, and when he is released, he weighs just 86 pounds.
I just regard myself as a soldier, so a soldier of peace. Would you say a few words for France, Mr. Gandhi? No, you don't know. Only for France.
I can call the French. What? Finish now. That's lovely. Huh? Goodbye.
Despite the growing turbulence, to visitors, India still seems ageless, but also impoverished and often desperate. Gandhi is unequivocal about where the blame lies.
India has become so poor that she has little power to resist famine. Little do town dwellers know how the semi-starved masses of Indians are slowly sinking into lifelessness. I have no doubt that England will have to answer, if there is a God above, for this crime against humanity.
Gandhi becomes the people's messiah. This is Allahabad, April 1937, the second oldest city in India. It is built at the sacred union of the rivers Ganges, Yamuna, and the mythical Saraswati. The city is at the heart of India's dream of independence. In 1931, at Alfred Park, Allahabad, the revolutionary Chandrasekhar Azad killed himself when surrounded by the British police. It is also the birthplace of Jawaharlal Nehru, the most significant member of India's most powerful dynasty, and second only to Gandhi as India's most revered leader. While imprisoned by the British during the Second World War, he will write a history of India called The Discovery of India.
India is a geographical and economic entity, a cultural unity amidst diversity, a bundle of contradictions held together by strong but invisible threads. Overwhelmed again and again, her spirit was never conquered. And today, when she appears to be a plaything of a proud conqueror, she remains unsubdued and unconquered. and an idea, a dream and a vision, and yet very real and present and pervasive.
It was in Allahabad in December 1930, during his presidential address to the All India Muslim League, that Allama Muhammad Iqbal proposed a separate Muslim state for the Muslim majority regions of India. It proved to be prophetic, sowing the seeds of the idea of the land of the pure, Pakistan. The great chasms between the many religions of India, especially between Muslims and Hindus, become the greatest threat to India's future. Jawaharlal Nehru.
We must constantly remind ourselves that whatever our religion or creed, we are all one people. I regret that many recent disturbances have given us a bad name. Many have acquiesced to the prevailing spirit. We must prevail on the evildoers to stop their activities.
Remarkably, the wisdom of India's leaders, like Gandhi and Nehru, has begun to make real the British dream of a single, unified India. 1938, Northern India. The British elite at leisure, oblivious as the country's enormous underprivileged masses are getting poorer and poorer. They seem not to realise that Britain's dream of a mighty and prosperous empire in India is crumbling, unable to cope with the scale of the challenge, especially without the help of an uncooperative population. These ingenious devices are called cat-nahoos, bullock skins inflated through one leg and made into rafts. Originally a useful mode of transport across North India's many rivers, in this instance they are adapted for the amusement of the British in search of a little adventure. But Britain's supreme adventure, the Raj itself, will soon be over. As the 1930s come to an end, India's future becomes more and more uncertain. It is not only challenged by internal threats, but also by the outside world. To the east, war is already in full swing in China, with its forces trying to contain the invading Japanese, who have imperial ambitions of their own and will soon be at the gates of India itself. In the west, India's British masters are bracing themselves for war in Europe. Dictators are strutting. Armies are marching. And weapons are being mass-produced. As the 1930s end, India and the rest of the world are on the brink of a global war. By the time it is over, more than 55 million people will be dead. The world will be a very different place. Britain's empire will collapse within 20 years, and India will be free at last to find its own place in the world.